Morning, everyone. Somebody once said that it's the small things that often make a big difference. And I'm here perhaps to talk about one such small thing that made a huge difference to me. And hopefully you'll be able to take something from that. For me, the journey started when I was about 14 years old. And my father was a senior officer in the Indian Air Force. And I would like to share with you two specific incidents that were instrumental, two specific small incidents that were instrumental in shaping my worldview, or at least my people view, if not my worldview. Both these incidents have to do with my father, who was a senior officer with the Indian Air Force, a typical image of an Air Force pilot that you can conjure up, 6 feet, 2 inches tall, broad-shouldered, extremely handsome-looking man. Obviously, the genes went elsewhere. The first incident happened when I was about 14 years old, and we were staying in this Delhi cantonment, the armed forces area, which is a very close-knit community. And I was out and about in the middle of the afternoon. I still remember the month was June, it was Delhi. And in the middle of the afternoon, me and my friends were out and about doing what regular teenage boys would do, you should know. When suddenly, while walking around this marketplace, one of my friends pointed to a direction and said, "Hey, isn't that Gatik's father?" And everybody turned to look. And as I turned to look, the sight that was in front of me left me quite shocked and embarrassed, really. Because what I saw was outside there was this car mechanic workshop where my father used to take his car frequently to get it repaired. And outside this workshop, there was this huge tree. And under this tree were some newspapers strewn about. And sitting on those newspapers were these mechanics with their dirty hands and dirty clothes, having their lunch with their tiffin boxes open. And sitting amongst them was my father, the senior Air Force officer, having lunch with them. And I do want to remind you that I was all of 14 at that point of time, and the only thing that mattered to me was what my friends think of me more than anything else. And I felt quite embarrassed. How could Dad do such a thing? But I remember the one person who was not at all shocked or embarrassed or feeling uncomfortable in that entire situation was my father. And I still remember the look on his face. He was happy. He was smiling. He was perhaps making conversation, cracking jokes, sharing lunch with them, feeling extremely comfortable in the presence of these people. I went back home and I tried to speak to my brother about how could Dad do something like this, and he tried to explain something to me. I don't remember that bit, but this image of my father sitting under this tree with these mechanics having food has stayed with me till today. And that's the first incident I wanted to share with all of you today. The second incident happened just a year later. My father got a rank promotion, and we were invited to the commanding officer's house for dinner. And I still remember we reached the house. It was a palatial building, really, really huge. And as I entered the house, I still remember distinctly feeling very, very out of place, because the house was too proper, too clean, too right. There were sculptures. There was a mini fountain happening in the porch. And there were a lot of glass statues, and I was half scared I'm going to knock off something and break it. But the specific incident I want to share with you is when we sat down for dinner at the dining table, huge dining table, the most fancy dining table I've ever seen. And I'm sitting there with my napkin tucked in, feeling very, very odd and uncomfortable with the knife and fork and everything, the most, delicate cutlery and crockery in front of me. And I'm sitting there feeling very uncomfortable in this setting, and from the corner of my eye, I see my father sitting at the edge, wearing his crisp white shirt, his maroon cravat, his tweed jacket with those leather patches, looking every bit the officer that he was, very stylishly opening up the bottle of wine, very elegantly pouring the wine, passing it around for the ladies, passing around the cheese and the crackers. And as I looked at my father in this avatar, I couldn't help but compare this image of my father with the image of my father 1 year back sitting under the tree. And the question that popped in my head was, how can a man be so adaptable and so flexible in such diverse settings? And I guess somewhere that adaptability, that flexibility rubbed off on me, and as I continued to grow through my teens in the armed forces setup, I always had two distinct set of friends. One set of friends were fellow kids of Air Force Army officers with whom I had a great time. And we used to go play tennis, we used to go play squash, we used to go swimming. We used to go, before 31st December, we used to go practice in the ballroom for our dance moves. We had a great time. And the second set of friends I always had was all kids of domestic help. And you have a lot of those in cantonments, in the armed forces areas. And these kids, my friends, I had a fabulous time with them. They taught me fun things like how to climb trees, something I've passed on to my elder daughter who's 11, and she's pretty good at it now. They taught me how to make the catapult, the slingshot, how to shoot a bird with it, cook in the open, done it, not proud of it today. And as I continued to grow out of my teens, and as I had to take a decision about my career, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Honestly, I'm still not sure what I want to do very often, but one thing became clear. I wanted to be in a space, I wanted to be in a profession that gave me an opportunity to connect with, relate with people from different socioeconomic levels, different cultural backgrounds, and just see how we can adapt, flex, and relate with each other and make a difference in each other's lives. And that's the reason I do what I do, and that's the reason I've been doing this for the last 18, 19 years, and that's the reason I stand in front of all of you today to see how is it that we can, at least I can relate with you in this small talk and see what is the difference we could make. And having shared that about myself, what I obviously want to ask you is, how did you feel over the last 5-6 minutes hearing my own life's journey, my own life story? And often when I share something like this, the kind of responses that I get are, it was engaging. I could relate to it. I could connect to it. I could visualize it. I still remember one of my favorite authors growing up was Enid Blyton. I don't know how many of you have even read that. And the best part was every 5 pages, I would raid the fridge because of the way she would describe the food that would be laid out on the table. And she was just brilliant at this art of helping somebody see the story. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about, the art of storytelling, really, which is, I think, a lost art in many ways. My very strong conviction, my very strong belief is that we're all born storytellers. We're all born storytellers, all of us. And I believe we're all born storytellers who've just become shy or unsure of telling stories. And I think as we grow older, and as you grow older, younger, older, the question is, are we going to start becoming shy of telling stories, which is the one thing that comes so naturally to us and is so powerful to help us connect with people, to help us relate with people, to help us inspire, influence, and help people make a change happen. So, stories are in fact so powerful that for centuries now, they've been instrumental in shaping how countries, how societies, how companies also have been shaped over the years, right from the time of the cavemen. So storytelling is, by the way, the most ancient form of communication. Even before language came in, stories were used to pass down information from generation to generation to talk about the values. All of us would have heard stories from our grandparents, from our parents, some fables, some stories that passed down some message to us. To somebody once who stood up on the stage and said, "I have a dream." To somebody who more recently said, "My dream is to put a dent in the universe." Now, these are all stories that have really, really shaped the world, shaped society, and shaped people. And it's important for us to understand in this space of, and the reason I want to talk to all of you about this is because in this huge talk about artificial intelligence and digital, which is great and which is happening, we need to embrace it. In this entire space of moving towards artificial intelligence, let's not lose the one thing that comes so naturally to us, which is our own emotional intelligence, our own ability to connect with, relate with people, and make a difference in their lives. And I want to talk to you about why it makes so much sense for us to tell stories, why it makes sense for each one of you to continue to tell stories as you pursue your dreams, as you figure out what you want to do in life. Because if I was to tell you a story, let me tell you a first story, first of all, simple story. Here's the story. The king died, then the queen died. Yeah? That's a story. Yeah? But let me tell you the same story again. Let me say the king died, then the queen died of grief. What happens? The moment I add these two words, something changes in the story. Something changes in you and in the way you receive the story. And what changes is that you start becoming more emotionally invested in the characters, in the story. You're perhaps thinking, oh, then the queen died of grief. How would she have felt? How long were they married for? What happened? You know nothing about these characters, but you've started getting emotionally invested. in the story. And that's really the power of stories in communicating your message to the world, in communicating your idea to the world, in communicating anything to anyone, really. And I also want to talk to you about this huge debate around stories versus data when we communicate. And it's important. It's important, really, because all of you growing up in this space, in this world, and it's exciting because there's so much possibility. There's so much that we can do with technology. There's so much that we can do with data and with analytics and with information. It's amazing, and I'm a believer in that. But often, we embrace all of that at the cost of letting go of something that comes very naturally to us, which is really telling stories and relating with people. And often, we have this debate around, are stories powerful or is data more powerful? You know, people buy data. You give them data, they'll get convinced, right? So what works? And to answer this question, in the year 2007, Carnegie Mellon University decided to run a research. It's publicly available off the web. And the objective of the study that they did was to find out that when people need to be influenced, when people need to get inspired, what works more, data or stories? And to do that, they identified a sample audience, which was their target audience. And the objective was to raise funds for a nonprofit. And they decided to write 2 letters, drawing the attention of people to raise funds for the NGO. The first letter was a story-based letter, which told the heart-wrenching story of a little girl living in a third world nation and a day in her life. That was the first letter, the story-based letter. The second letter had all the relevant facts, statistics, and data on the number of villages that don't have electricity, the number of kids who are malnutrition, the number of people who die before the age of 30, all statistics, the number of villages that don't have electricity, that don't have toilets, so on and so forth. So first letter was the story-based letter, and the second letter was the data-based letter. And the results were quite astounding, really, because the results came out that the story-based letter sold 118% more than the data-based letter. 118%. That's a huge amount. So regardless of what we may be thinking about facts and statistics and data, what this story is telling us, or this research is telling us, is that that may not be true. So the researchers at Carnegie Mellon didn't stop there. They got excited seeing this. Wow, this is exciting. So they said, let's try one more attempt. Instead of doing these 2 letters, let's make a third letter. Let's do it again. But now this letter that we want to send out, let's make one letter that has both story and data into it. And that kind of made sense, And they said, the story part of the letter will appeal to the people who like listening to stories. And, the facts and figures, the database part of the same letter will appeal to the people who are more fact-oriented, data-oriented. So they were pretty excited, and they put this letter across, sent it out to people. The results were far from what they expected, and quite shocking, really, because the results came out that the story and data-based approach sold 40% lesser than the letter with just the story. So regardless of what we may think about the way we communicate, the way we express, the way we influence, the way we reach out to people with data and information, here's reality staring at us in the face, that the story-based approach does help a lot better sell, to convince people to get your idea across than data, right? And that's not it. That's just one part of it. I'm also a huge fan of neuroscience. I love that space. I love understanding how the brain functions. And let me give you some information from the space of neuroscience to help each one of you understand why we should not stop telling stories. So I'm not a medical expert, but I do understand a little bit. I do like reading up on this. And the way our brain is wired, and recent technology in brain-based activity helps scientists track which part of the brain gets activated when something happens, right? And they put these wires, and there's a huge screen, and they track those activities. So when a person receives information through only data and facts, that activates only 2 regions of the brain. And both these regions have only one job. And the job of both these regions is to simply give meaning to language. Give meaning to language. So they're translators. That's all these 2 regions do. But when somebody receives a story, either you listen to a story or you see a story, or you read a story, It activates as many as 7 areas of our brain, including what is called our sensory cortex, also called our Broca's area. So, that's the reason. That kind of makes sense, because if you look at it, when you're watching a movie, which is a story, and there's a high-speed car chase happening there, you're gripping the seat and you're moving like that, right? How's that happening? Because our brain is fooling us to tell us that that's real. And we end up behaving the same way, because our senses work the same way. Which is why you watch a movie where somebody's hanging off a cliff and your palms start sweating, right? How do you explain that? You see somebody having a great meal, and all these burger companies do a great job at it, right? They show these burgers, right? Oh, by the way, they're never the same size as this one on the side, right? And you see that burger and your mouth starts watering. You see that person on screen having that burger and you're like, I want one, right? Where's the next burger joint? So stories are extremely powerful because they make people get immersed in what you're trying to express. And I think in all of this, the big question really is, so what's really in it for me? What's in it for each one of you as young students, mature students, professionals, individuals who want to make a change in the community? I think the first and the biggest advantage of doing this is storytelling really helps us establish credibility. And that's something we're going to need a lot of as we go out and meet more and more people. It helps us in this world of noise, where there's so much noise, where there's so many people saying so many things. It helps you stand out. It helps you become memorable and different. It enables you to build emotional connect with people, which is really important to get people invested in you and your idea, your dreams, your passion. You're going to need people to help you with that. Maybe even your parents to lend you some money. And it helps you sell your idea much better. Much, much, much better. Because stories help influence not just the mind, but also the heart. So in conclusion, I just want to leave you with this thought that I still believe that we're all born storytellers who've just become shy or unsure of telling stories. And in my view, storytelling is a lot like dancing. It's a lot like dancing, and I see it with my 2 daughters every single day. And in dancing, we go through these 5 stages in life, right? I know clearly which stage I'm in. I'm not sure about you. The first stage is the child, right? And you may have seen this image. It's pretty popular on the net. The child. Now, the child dances, and the child tells stories in the same way, right? So when you're a child, you dance like no one is watching. I don't care, right? So we dance like no one is watching, and then we grow up. And when we grow up, we become the awkward teen, right? This is that moment where from dancing like no one is watching, we start dancing like everyone is watching, right? Extremely conscious. At least I was. And then we reach the stage where we become the confident teen. Now we dance because everyone is watching. I want to show off my moves now, right? And that's the same with storytelling. And then life comes back a full circle when you go right out of the school, out into a college, and you start getting into jobs, or you start your own firms, and you start doing whatever you do. And when we reach adulthood, in this space where we have to create an impression, and where looking good is so important, and what people think of me is so important, and data is so important, we become the adult. And we go back. We don't move forward. We go back to the stage we start dancing like everyone is watching again. I don't want to dance. No, after one song. That's the stage I'm in, I guess, in dancing at least. And eventually, hopefully, we reach the stage of going back to the child, but this time as an old person, right? Again, dancing like no one is watching. So I don't really know what stage you're in, but the only message I have for you is that we're all born storytellers. It comes naturally to us. It's really powerful, guys. It helps us connect. It helps us relate. It helps us get our message across. But sometimes, unfortunately, like with dancing, we get caught in this whole world of data and information and what people are going to think and what people are going to say. We let go of this art. And, Dalai Lama has said it beautifully in what he said here. And I think it's really powerful. Because in this world with so much happening, we need more people who can heal, who can spread the good word, who can tell stories, who can inspire. So thank you very much, everyone, for hearing me out. And I wish you all the very best in pursuing your passions, pursuing your dreams, but in doing whatever you do, don't forget, you've got a lot of stories to share. So thank you very much.